Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 8th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, editor of Think Justice, Ian Millhiser. On the SCOTUS and gerrymandering, as well as Trump's fraudulent emergency. Speaking of which, tonight at 9 Eastern, must-see TV, as all major networks run the second season of The Caravan. Meanwhile, will Trump's fake emergency lead to a fake wall, which will end the real government shutdown crisis? Meanwhile, Trump's education department to make for-profit colleges more for-profity and less collegey. In Syria, Turks and Kurds ready for all-out war. And with Americans learning more about traditional marginal tax rates, AOC has already won. And it turns out that so-called skills gap we kept hearing about, not so much. And speaking of which, about those terrorists at the border, well, they're already issuing apologies in the White House for overstating the number by nearly 3,000%. All that and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I now am in, I think this is the, the other day we had our 2000th episode. Totally forgot about it.
Yeah, Friday. I didn't even notice until I was numbering the show.
Just apathetically steamrolled right through
We
it.
apathetically steamrolled through that in a grotesque fashion. So happy 2000th episode to us. I can't even imagine now. Let's see. That's been 8 years. So 2000 over 8 years. And I think prior to that, I got to be pushing somewhere around 3,200 episodes, just period. So good luck to my kids combing through all of those. Also, I should say, celebrating now almost, I think this is the fifth day, which I have not said 2018 at the beginning of the announcements of the show. So I'm pretty excited about that. Folks, the 2020 presidential campaign has started at least, pretty much in earnest. And we have pictures that a listener sent in from 2 nights ago, I guess it was. Was it 2 or 3 nights ago when Elizabeth Warren was in Iowa, and apparently these are from listener Irma in Des Moines. People were excited to see Elizabeth Warren. I don't know if you can see that, but that is at least 2 blocks worth of, well, now make that 3 or 4 blocks of people lined up in Iowa to see Elizabeth Warren. And, there's a lot of excitement on the ground for Elizabeth Warren. These narratives get built. There was, people forget, but in 2014, maybe it was 2012, Elizabeth Warren was brought into, I think it was 2012, brought into a campaign for people like Claire McCaskill, and others. She was an asset around the country to a lot of people, and she's obviously creating a certain amount of consternation amongst folks in the center right, and ostensibly in the, I guess, the right side of the, and by right I mean in terms of their politics, of the Democratic Party. Here is Stephen Ratner on Morning Joe. Stephen Ratner, you may recall, was in charge of the, I think, the GM bailout, and of course also was charged by the SEC with a pay-to-play scheme involving the New York State Pension Fund back in his days as a private equity guy. And, you know, who amongst us has not had to settle with the SEC to pay a $6.2 million fine for overstepping, you know, some of the fudging around the edges of things?
What is a kickback, really?
Really, honestly.
More like an opportunity.
But here is Stephen Ratner on Morning Joe talking about some of the hesitation they may have. You know, I think sometimes you show your hand a little bit too early. Like, you're supposed to hold your cards a little bit closer to your vest. But I think some people are so deep into the bubble that they really, really don't even realize what they're exposing about themselves.
So, Steve Ratner, I know that we don't usually, Mika and I don't usually go to political fundraisers.
Pause it for 1 second. I just need to laugh.
I knew that was a well-warranted and certain pause it coming.
Right. Yeah. There we go. Let's just. All right. I'm sorry.
I don't usually go to political fundraisers for a lot of different reasons. But I'm just curious, when you hold your political fundraiser for Elizabeth Warren,
Steve,
could we just be sort of some flies on the wall? Because we really would love to be there and just see the warm embrace of Elizabeth's, the respected senator's populism.
Well, you won't be a fly on the wall, because if I hold a fundraiser for Elizabeth Warren and I go to my friends to ask them to attend, it will be a very sparse crowd, and so there will be room for you to sit right up at the head of the table next to her and enjoy the full. No, look, in all seriousness, I think everything that you've talked about and Karen wrote about Elizabeth Warren and her appeal and her passion and her populism is all true, and I think it will resonate to some degree in the Democratic Party. I would note she doesn't poll as well as some other, Bernie Sanders in particular, candidates who are espousing the same point of view, and she's trying to fix certain image issues, and we can go through all that. But the real question is, when you get to the general election, will a candidate who is so, in effect, anti-capitalism, anti-business, anti-Wall Street, anti-rich, anti-a lot of things, will that prevail even against Donald Trump? And
is that it? Oh, let's hear him waffle on a little bit more. I'm curious.
Will that prevail even against Donald Trump in a general election? And I think there are those of us in the Democratic Party, and this is not personal about Elizabeth, who I think has a lot of great personal qualities and is certainly a very devoted public servant. But is that really the type of candidate we want to put into a general election, even up against Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, of course it is. The proposals that she espouses are wildly popular. You want to put up a candidate who says we need to protect Wall Street, we need to protect the big banks, we need to protect the very wealthy in this country because they're not getting their share. Good luck to you. I mean, what's amazing about this is that he is so divorced from reality, so unaware of what the average American feels towards what's happened in our society, that he doesn't even realize that what he should be saying is that I'm not sure that Elizabeth Warren has the charisma, or that he's got it completely backwards. He's already showing his cards. in a way that I think is just a fascinating revelation about how completely divorced from reality guys like this are. They don't even have the savvy to hide the fact that they're sitting there and shilling for essentially, I mean, not enough people to even fill out a neighborhood in New York City. Well, maybe in Manhattan, maybe just the island, half of Manhattan,
maybe
a few
but
towers.
But
I was gonna say, but not even really, because the Upper East Side's actually bigger than people think.
it's absolutely stunning. I mean, there are, I just don't understand how someone can go on. And I'm not saying any candidate is above critique, but I don't understand how anyone can go on television and say those things and think that they're actually making an argument that helps themselves. I mean, because all of the people who watch Morning Joe, or not all, but a significant amount, they may already feel those things, but they should be hiding the ball. That's what the Republican Party did for decades.
Well, serious point and frivolous point. And serious point is I do think there is something specific about Morning Joe in that it's like a feedback loop, elite to elite conversation. So there's something maybe about just policing the boundaries of what's acceptable inside that specific conversation that happens on that show. Maybe,
but that's the thing. It's like
I understand. No, I get it.
A little more wink, wink.
I
nudge,
understand.
nudge.
I get it. I agree. But I do think sometimes when you watch that show, the only part of that show that has any kind of public value is it's probably the closest to being in like Steve Ratner's townhouse talking to Joe, and it's like this is how they think. This is what the mentality is. Frivolous point. That was a much more boring version of the Ana Navarro "Get My Love Juices Flowing" clip from the other day.
Can we get can we play that drop? Can we get a candidate that myself and Bill Kristol will appreciate?
You know, me and Bill Kristol don't like overt racism, and we like war. And so maybe if the Democrats could do that with a certain degree of class, Bill Kristol and I will be excited.
Unbelievable.
I do.
Well,
I do think he was ridiculous in the end, but I do think he had a serious point towards the beginning, which is that she does have similar politics to Bernie Sanders, but is not as compelling a candidate the general election.
I mean, that's possible. I mean, we got, Bernie Sanders is, if you had talked about Bernie Sanders 6 months before he ever ran for office, he would be polling nowhere on a public level. Of course, he was a senator, and people were aware of him. But I think we will get a better sense of Elizabeth Warren's national appeal when she's on a national stage, and it's not because Mitch McConnell's saying, hey, you can't read Coretta Scott King's words on the Senate floor. When she gets out and she has the ability to control the narrative, that's, I think, when you judge. Bernie Sanders, what he polled before he entered the race, 6 months before he entered the race, was 0. I mean, maybe it was 3. I don't know. But
sure.
Well, he did it with a certain degree of class, is what James
I am begging Democrats to please give me somebody that I can vote for.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm just a little worried that she's going to get all of the bad parts of being like Bernie and none of the good parts. Like these folks like this guy are always going to say she's an anti-capitalist no matter how many times she says, I'm a capitalist.
There is no doubt in my mind that Steve Ratner will vote against Elizabeth Warren. But I suspect that if you were to take a poll of women, particularly the women who drove this last midterm election, that it's quite possible Elizabeth Warren would be at the very least competitive with Bernie Sanders.
If Sanders or Warren and potentially Sherrod Brown is the nominee, Steve Ratner will write in Erskine Bowles.
There you go.
That's my prediction.
Folks, one of today's sponsors is Skillshare, and the first 500 people who go to skl.sh/majority are going to get 2 whole months of totally free access to Skillshare's entire library of super quality online courses and tutorials. Skillshare is a vibrant online learning community that offers courses on everything from design to video editing, photography, business, technology, cooking, meditation, everything in between. There are Skillshare courses for everyone. You're going to have no problem finding any courses that are useful to you both in your personal life and your professional life. Whether you want to sharpen your skills with something you already love doing or you want to learn how to do something totally new, Skillshare has you covered. They have courses for entrepreneurs, courses on computer coding, web development, personal nutrition, learning new languages, Photoshop, you name it. I had suggested before the break that I was going to look into accounting. I didn't. I got caught up in a couple of woodworking classes. But nevertheless, I'm a better person for it.
You ever smoke a corncob pipe when you do that?
No. When I watch videos?
No, when you do your woodworking. No.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Like a little raccoon hat. It's like, I do my project.
Raccoon hat?
Like Jimmy Davy Crockett or whatever the hell.
Sam ain't no corn cob.
Yeah, there's no Davy Crockett. I mean, I think you're...
Dude, I'm mixing genres here. It's not
a lot
that
of different
much
genres.
Of a stretch.
No, woodworking and
okay, how about a corncob pipe?
Pioneering the West, two different things. You can get 2 entire months of free access to every single course offered by Skillshare by going to skl.sh/majority. Just think of everything you'll have at your fingertips for 2 whole months. Again, that's skl.sh/majority. Put a link underneath this video. I put a link in the podcast description. Check it out. Quick break. When we come back, Ian Millhiser on the gerrymandering cases heading to the Supreme Court and perhaps the legality of what we anticipate Donald Trump will be doing tonight on television. Be right back. Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the editor of the Justice Editor for ThinkProgress.org, Ian Millhiser. Ian, welcome back to the program.
It's good to be here. Thanks so much.
All right, let's start with the gerrymandering cases that are heading to the Supreme Court, because there is a fairly significant backstory to these gerrymandering cases and the gerrymandering cases that have been in front of the Supreme Court. And there's a fairly troubling, what do you call it, future story that could be happening here. Tell us, just give us a little bit sense of the history of gerrymandering cases that have gone to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, this is going to end really badly. So the relevant history here probably begins with 2004. In a case called V Jubilare, Justice Scalia wrote an opinion on behalf of 4 members of the court saying that not only are we not going to strike down the gerrymander that's being challenged in this case, but our view, the view of these 4 justices, is that partisan gerrymandering is just not a matter for federal courts at all. Federal courts can never consider a partisan gerrymandering case. Justice Kennedy gave people a little bit of hope in that case, though, because he wrote a separate opinion where he said, I'm not going to strike down this gerrymander, but in a future case, you might be able to convince me there's a standard I could use to sort out which gerrymanders are not allowed. And so that was the hope that people brought into the last Supreme Court term, where they thought there's this terrible Wisconsin gerrymander, there's this very aggressive Democratic gerrymander in Maryland. Surely we can get Justice Kennedy to say that these crossed the line, and people had some really, promising legal theories. Well, Justice Kennedy decided to punt the issue, and he decided to punt the issue, and then a few days later he left the court. And
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, the hopes for Kennedy were that he had specifically asked to social scientists, I guess broadly speaking, come up with a way in which we can measure when something has been overly gerrymandered. And in fact, social scientists did that with a concept of wasted votes, right?
That's right. Yeah. So Kennedy had said, look, it's hard to determine which maps are partisan gerrymanders and which ones aren't. I need something objective, something clear cut that lets me sort bad maps from good maps. And there were a bunch of theories that people came up with. They were basically just mathematical formulas where you could take the records from the last election, plug it into this formula, and that would tell you if this map was likely to be a gerrymander or not. And so people were really, really hopeful. I remember attending the oral argument in the Wisconsin case and thinking, oh, yeah, we've got 5 votes. Like, they're going to strike this map down. Things are going to get better soon. And that is just not what happened. Kennedy decided not to decide the case, and then he decided to give the middle finger to everyone that was hoping that he would stick around and retain some semblance of the rule of law in this country. And Trump replaced him with Brett Kavanaugh, who, of course, threatened Senate Democrats at his confirmation hearing, said that what goes around comes around, because Democrats dared to probe allegations that Kavanaugh tried to rape someone.
And we should say, in terms of Wisconsin, the theories, I guess the algorithms that would determine wasted votes, seem to be borne out when you look at the results of the last election, where Democrats won, 54% of the vote, and Republicans took 63% of the seats in the state house?
That's right.
That's nuts.
Yeah, so
that's just like I want everybody just to sort of like marinate in that. We
right.
This is not the Senate being appointed by landowners. This is not the Senate set up as a way of not being particularly democratic in terms of the number of people representing. This is on a fairly localized level where you have a 54% to 46% split. That's like what we would call a landslide, right?
Right. Yeah. Wisconsin, for all intents and purposes, is no longer a Democratic state. They have a democratically elected governor who, as of I think yesterday, is a Democrat. But their legislature, it is impossible. Absent maybe if Democrats managed to get 60 or 70% of the vote, it would happen. But that's not happening in Wisconsin. It is impossible for Democrats to win the state assembly when you have a map where you can get 54% of the vote and the other party still gets 63% of the seats. So that's how aggressive this gerrymander is, that Justice Kennedy looked at and said, instead of doing something about this, I'm just going to leave it to Brett Kavanaugh. So that's the position we're in right now. And what I think is likely to happen now that these cases are back, this time it's a North Carolina gerrymander, which is almost as aggressive as the Wisconsin one, plus the Maryland case again. And what's likely to happen is I think you've got 5 votes right now to just say, you know what? Gerrymandering is not the business of the federal courts. Federal courts will never do anything about gerrymandering. And if you're an entrenched political party that wants to ensure that you never lose control of your state legislature again, go to town.
That's a pretty convenient timing for a Republican Supreme Court to be making that proclamation. And we should say there's a case in Maryland, right, that is being brought against Democrats as a way of basically trying to just get the gerrymandering under some measure of control.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Maryland case, it's one of the few states. So part of the history here is that Republicans had a great electoral year in 2010. And a big problem with our system is that new maps must be drawn every 10 years, every time there's a new census. And so if you happen to win, if your party happens to win the year that ends in 0, that means you don't just get control for 2 years or until the next election. It means you also get to draw the state legislative and the congressional maps. And so since Republicans swept through basically all the swing states in 2010, they were then able to draw these maps that entrenched their power. And now, going into the 2020 census and then going into the next the next round of redistricting, in states where Republicans still control the legislature and can't be dislodged, in some states maybe Democrats will be able to capture the governor's mansion. And so they'll be able to at least veto the worst gerrymanders. But Republicans have a huge advantage in these states because they're guaranteed to control the legislature. And there's even some states, in North Carolina, I believe, the governor doesn't have the power to veto a redistricting map.
And
so
that
Republicans
was, we should say, that was from a lame duck session in North Carolina, like the one that was done in Wisconsin, although Evers doesn't seem to be he's basically saying, like, you can sue me in terms of abiding by those laws. But if I remember correctly, the reason why the Democratic governor in North Carolina can't veto it is because of laws that were passed in the lame duck, basically stripping him or, her in the future of their ability to do that. Well, Ian,
yeah. I'm not sure about the origins there, but the point is that, they have managed not just to entrench their rule for 10 years, but potentially managed to entrench their rule permanently, because the only way to dislodge Republicans from their control of the state legislature is to win is for Democrats to win a state legislative race that cannot be won because Republicans drew the maps.
Now, there seems to me to be a very sensible and rational way to deal with this. If the state, the citizens of the state vote to create like an independent commission. These things are never perfect,
right,
but at least an independent commission would have some semblance of neutrality to some extent. Right. So that seems like the most rational decision that can be made. But ...
Yeah, right. So a lot of states, Arizona has one, California has one, quite a few states. I think, Michigan and Wisconsin just passed ballot initiatives whose purpose is to make it harder to gerrymander, or at least Michigan did. But the problem is that a few years ago, there was a case challenging the Arizona Redistricting Commission. And the good news is that the Supreme Court voted 5-4 to say, yes, you can have this redistricting commission. The bad news is that the fifth vote was, guess who? Anthony Kennedy. And Anthony Kennedy's been replaced by Bardo Kavanaugh, who said that he's going to take revenge on Democrats. So there is a very high likelihood that these independent commissions are going to come before the Supreme Court again, that there will now be 5 votes to strike them down, and that means that the Supreme Court will make gerrymandering even worse than it already is.
What is the possible justification for striking down these independent commissions?
Sure. So the Constitution says that as a general rule, legislative maps shall be drawn by the state legislatures. I think it says by the legislator thereof, which thereof referring back to the state. And so the argument is that the word legislature in that context means the elected body of lawmakers who typically make laws. The problem with that argument is that there's at least a century of precedent saying that in this context, that's not what the word legislature means. So the word legislature means any body in a state that is empowered to make laws. So that can be, for example, a ballot initiative. But what the dissenters argued in the Arizona case is that they argued that only the state legislature and not a ballot initiative is permitted to rein in gerrymandering.
But isn't there, I mean, and I guess maybe you've just answered that by saying that there's a century of precedent, but we see this all the time where the legislature can farm out their authority, right? And either affirmatively or by the nature of the I guess the constitution of the state.
Right. Yeah. I mean, actually, under the theory of the dissenters, things could get really, really troubling. I mean, if you take their argument seriously, does that mean that a governor cannot veto a redistricting bill because the governor is not the legislature, he is the executive, and therefore in states like, say, Wisconsin, where Democrats are counting on the Democratic governor to veto the next Republican gerrymander, that the governor can't do that? Does that mean that in states like Pennsylvania, where the state Supreme Court struck down the gerrymander, that, well, the judiciary is the judiciary, not the legislature. So maybe the judiciary isn't allowed to weigh in. And so this could take us to a world, if the dissenting view in the Arizona case ultimately prevails, where the only people who are allowed to draw maps are legislatures, which are controlled by Republicans because Republicans entrenched themselves in the 2010 election. And as it turns out, the 2010 election is the only election that will ever matter again, because, once you gain control of the state legislature, it's impossible to dislodge the party that controls it.
Is there any way that, now these cases in North Carolina and Maryland don't necessarily implicate a referendum for creating an independent commission? Is there any way that the court, I know there's probably a way, but what's the likelihood of the court saying, hey, and incidentally, even though this is not at issue in this case, since we're here, we might as well also say independent commissions, not kosher?
I don't think that they'd strike down independent commissions in either the North Carolina or in the Maryland case, because neither one of those states has an independent coalition or independent commission. But all it takes, Arizona could do it again. All it takes is for Republicans to file the exact same lawsuit they filed in Arizona a few years ago. They can even dust off the same brief that they filed and just refile them. And, now it goes up to the Supreme Court again, and the Supreme Court says, there were 4 of us last time, but there's 5 of us now, you lose.
That would seem like a, pretty nakedly partisan ruling, wouldn't it? But do you think they care?
Maybe they care. That's that is the question on which the rule of law in this country hinges, and not specifically if they care, but if Chief Justice John Roberts cares. There are, the angel and the devil sitting on Roberts' shoulder is he has a devil that says, oh, you just want conservatives to win everything, you should do that. And he has an angel who says, if you push too hard, then the Supreme Court's going to be delegitimized. People will stop listening to your decisions, and that's going to undermine your ability to enact conservative policies in the long run. And the question is whether he listens to the angel or he listens to the devil. And no one but John Roberts knows who he's going to listen to in any given case.
I like how John Roberts' angel is just a sort of pragmatically evil devil. He's just a little bit.
No. Like there's nothing good.
There's the devil, and then there's just the more pragmatic devil that sits on his shoulders.
Yeah, there's the lawful evil John Roberts, and then there's the chaotic evil John Roberts, and you never know which one's going to prevail.
All right, so with that said, we will keep an eye on that. We are probably at least a year away, I guess, from the potential of the independent commissions being struck down. And, because of the nature of if you can get a democratically elected governor, you can get a referendum like we've seen in Michigan to have an independent commission, which could be, the sort of the last saving grace. So I guess we're a year away from finding out whether, at the very least, a year away, or is it possible they could take another case this late?
I mean, they could potentially take a case, but I don't think that there's one. I don't think there's one in the works.
Okay.
I mean, the saving grace is that someone has to file the case. It has to go to the district court. The district court has to say, hey, this is the exact same case that the Supreme Court decided 3 years ago. Go away, and then that goes up to the Supreme Court. So that will take time. There is, however, plenty of time for the Supreme Court to decide something like that before the 2020 redistricting cycle.
Great. All right. Well, let's turn to something else that's probably going to be as equally as disturbing. Tonight, Donald Trump is going to go on television, and he is going to tell us that our lake houses in Minnesota are subject to being rampaged by another caravan or something to that effect, and he's going to have to declare a national emergency. What, and I guess ostensibly to build a mile and a half stretch of a wall or a slat or whatever steel cladding. What does he have? Give me your sense from a legal perspective. How does this go down?
So, I guess there's two questions here. The one question is, so what Trump is apparently contemplating is he's going to declare a national emergency and then say, because there is an emergency, I can now order the U.S. military to go build the wall, even in the absence of congressional authorization or an appropriation allowing me to do so. And, the answer to the question, if you asked me to read the statutes myself, if I were the judge, I would look at them and say, no, he can't do that. But that's not the important question, whether this is legal or not. The important question is whether this Supreme Court will pretend it's legal because they're Republicans and so is Donald Trump. And I think it's likely they're going to say it is. I mean, I've been looking at the statutes, I've been staring at them all day, and it's not as clear-cut as I hoped it would be. Basically what it turns on is that there's a federal law saying that Trump can declare an emergency, and then he can authorize construction projects, provided that the emergency is requires the use of the military. And so I don't think this requires the use of the military. There's no reason, the reason why Trump can't build his wall isn't that there's some emergency and the only way to address it is to send troops. The reason why Trump can't build his wall is because he's unable to convince Congress to pass a law letting him build the wall. So in my mind, that's not an emergency that requires the use of the military. I mean, among other things, building isn't something that you need troops to do. Civilians can build things just fine. But you go to war with the Supreme Court you have, not the Supreme Court you want. And there is a long line of precedent saying that as a general rule, courts should defer to the president in matters of national security. I think that if there are 5 people in the Supreme Court who want to side with Donald Trump, and there probably will be, it'll be possible to write a judicial opinion that passes the last test, arguing that he can do this, and that's all they need.
Who would have standing to bring this case? I mean, who would sue? I mean, I guess ostensibly probably Congress, right? Because he would somehow get money that has not been appropriated by Congress.
Yeah. So the best plaintiff would be, a lot of the land that this wall would be built on is owned by private citizens, and so if one or more of those private citizens refuses to sell it to the government, then the government would have to use the eminent domain power to force a sale. And so that person, you clearly have standing if the government comes up to you and says, hey, that land you own, we're gonna buy it from you, and you can't say no. So, like, there's no question that that person has standing. I also think that that's the best plaintiff because, like, you know, in political cases like this, they aren't about the law. They're about competing values. And you have to appeal to the values of one of the judges whose vote you're trying to get in order to convince that judge to be on your side. And so I think there's an off chance that if, like, a property owner comes into court and says, look, I am a property owner, guys, like, you love Ayn Rand, like, I'm the person you're supposed to be looking out for, so protect me. I think that there is an off chance that someone like Thomas or Gorsuch might be, you know, by Jove, I do love Ayn Rand. I'm not here to protect Muslims, but property owners, those are important people. So there's an off chance that I think, you know, one of the Republicans on the court could rebel. But realistically speaking, like, this is the court that upheld the Muslim ban. I think they're going to be very deferential to a Republican president.
And in that scenario we're talking about is months away, right? I mean, so the idea is that Donald Trump says, we're building the wall, I can do it, I'm getting the money from here or there, and he starts to build the wall, or he doesn't. It doesn't, you know, from a political standpoint, it may very well be irrelevant, or I guess, you know, whether there's a legal recourse, because he just wants to say he's going to build it anyways, and that's basically it. I mean, I guess the question is, legally speaking, if he is allowed to do this, it seems like it might open up a set of can of worms, or no, for future presidents.
Oh, there's no. I mean, like, let's be clear about what Donald Trump, at least like according to news reports, is contemplating. Donald Trump is saying that he can use the United States military to take people's land. I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, like, you don't have to be a crazy libertarian to listen to that. He wants to use the military to take people's land, to be uncomfortable with that. And like,
isn't that like posse comitatus? I mean, isn't there, I mean, a whole raft of, aside from just sort of like, takings and eminent domain, like, aren't there restrictions? I mean, I guess we saw that play out at the border when the military was sent down there, and I guess it was Kelly and maybe Mattis said, like, you can't really do that legally, and they just did it.
Right, yeah. The posse comitatus statute says that you can't use the Army or the Air Force to enforce domestic laws. So, you know, you could argue that this violates that statute. I mean, there's a lot of really good arguments that you can raise. But, again, in these politically charged cases, they don't operate at the level of laws. They operate at the level of values. And so what I'm hoping happens is that there's at least one Republican on the Supreme Court who thinks about this. Again, we're talking about the president ordering the military to take people's land, you know, and that should shock you. I mean, it should shock them. And like, these are people who are supposed to care about property rights. So I think that's the best shot of stopping Trump here, is to get someone like a Thomas or a Gorsuch to understand that, again, he wants to order the military to take people's land. You know, maybe that'll be enough, but I'm not optimistic.
Yeah, I will not hold my breath. Ian Millhiser, thanks for. I mean, well, so let me just ask you this, and this might be outside your portfolio, but from a political standpoint, he gets up there tonight. He announces that there's a national emergency, despite the fact that we found out the administration had to walk back the 4,000 terrorists crossing the border. It turns out there were 6 people over the past 2 years who were on the terrorist watch list, which, of course, you know, at one point I think Senator Kennedy was on that list too. So that list is of dubious nature, but nevertheless. So do you have a sense, and like I say, maybe this is outside your portfolio, but he announces, hey, I'm building the wall. I'm going to get the money from the DHS, and I'm taking it, you know, because it's national emergency powers from the this surplus budget, and we're going to build the wall. And so I don't care if you put it in the budget or not. I'll sign the budget. And then just we're done? The government shutdown is more or less over tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, there's the possibility is that Trump uses this as his out so he can end the shutdown before people start getting really mad because they aren't getting their tax refunds. I mean, maybe this is just his fig leaf that he's using, but the problem with this fig leaf is that, like, I don't know that this Supreme Court is going to get the joke. I don't know that they're going to realize that, like, the point of this is, is to strike it down. Maybe they will. And, like, maybe they will understand. I mean, again, if the president can order the military to take people's land, then I don't know why President Elizabeth Warren can't say, okay, I'm going to order, I think it's a national security threat that too much banking power is concentrated in too few individuals. So I'm going to order the military to seize the banks. I don't know why President Ocasio-Cortez can't say, I think it's a national security emergency that poor people don't have adequate access to health care. So I'm going to order the military to seize a bunch of people's land so we can build public hospitals there. I mean, if the Roberts Court really wants to go there, then, this can cut in ways that they're not going to like.
That doesn't necessarily sound too bad to me, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. Ian Millhiser, Justice Editor, thinkprogress.org. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Get ready. We now have the opportunity for President Warren and Vice President Ocasio-Cortez to use the military to start to expropriate land. Yeah. I guess. There you go.
Hell yeah.
Now, of course, it's going to be done with the military, but do they redesign the military uniforms? They make them a little like everybody gets a red beret or something like that. What happens in that situation?
They have to dress like Yankee Doodle.
Is that it? So 9 p.m. Eastern tonight for the speech by Donald Trump. I may hop on YouTube live streaming at the house if the kids are asleep by that point. Maybe get some feedback from Mila on this tonight. But
we're going to do a unlocked post-game Mystery Science Theater of it as well.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You got it. I mean, this is like the full deployment of clown fascism. You can't ignore it.
We're going to continue ignoring it.
I have a feeling it's not going to be terribly dramatic.
It's going
to get up bad. I'm going to be so bored. This is going to be written. I'm going to be sniffing so much Adderall. I'm just going to be able to get through this thing in about 30 seconds.
I wanted to have a Tony Montana moment, but they hemmed me in. Totally unfair.
Oh, this was a pretty good moment. I have to concede that I missed the Golden Globes this year, which is something I always do. I always make it a point of missing the Golden Globes. And then what I like to do is follow that up with missing the Emmys and the Grammys and the Oscars. I like to miss all of those every year.
But I catch the Tonys.
But the one I do like to watch is the ESPYs. No, I'm joking. Is that still around?
ESPYs gets emotional. They do montages very well.
Isn't the ESPYs like they give awards to sports teams?
Hell yeah.
Okay. That to me seems a little bit redundant because one of the ways that sports teams get awarded is they win and then they win the championship.
There's a lot of random chance in sports.
That's true. This is for the deserving sports teams who happen to have lost to the less deserving.
We want a democracy and not a meritocracy.
But nevertheless, there was a good moment in the Oscars, which I felt, I mean, not Oscars, the Golden Globes, which I feel like was missed, right? Because Fox and Friends yesterday talked about how what's his face from Veep. What was that actor's name again?
Julie Louis-Dreyfus?
No, not from Vice. I'm sorry, the actor from
Christian
Vice.
Bale.
Christian Bale. had said something political, and they were very upset about it because it was an otherwise non-political night.
Oh, that was great. They were like, "Oh, this is just." I like when they're like, "This is just great.
Just great."
Dick Cheney worked so hard for this country, and you're just up there doing your movies, and you just gotta be so rude,
so rude."
Anyways,
But,
the Golden Girls turns 40 this year.
Andy Sandberg.
This is gonna upset them too.
Yeah, this is going to upset them, but I don't think they picked up on it. But
They
it's
understand
a little late on the uptake on this one. But he was talking about the Black Panthers. I guess they won some awards. Not the group, the movie. And he had this to say, which I thought was pretty good. Not necessarily something I would expect from him, but maybe that's my own bias.
If you told me as a kid growing up in the Bay there'd be a movie called Black Panther that starts off in Oakland, this is not what I would have imagined. Ryan, were there like a bunch of old members of the actual Black Panther Party saying, I can't even get an audition? Just kidding, they were all framed and murdered for wanting justice and equality. The world is and always has been a nightmare. It just seems worse now because of our phones. What else happened this year?
There you go.
Wow, that one really slipped under the radar.
Yeah.
Look at the way Yahoo Entertainment wrote up this bit. It says, if that sounds a bit awkward, well, it was, but not as awkward as Sandberg's attempts to poke fun at Black Panther director Ryan Coogler by asking if members of the actual Black Panther Party tried to audition for that blockbuster Marvel movie. Coogler's confused reaction spoke for all of us at home. I don't think he was confused.
That was definitely the
I
main
don't think he
takeaway
was
of that
confused.
bit. Absolutely. It was an awkward moment.
Who wrote that on Yahoo? It wasn't Chris Rosen, was it? Please.
Oh, no.
No, I'm joking. Yeah, I have a feeling.
This is Ethan Altif of Yahoo Entertainment.
I have a feeling Ethan just sort of quickly scribbled that off as he was he's writing up something.
Let's be more generous. Maybe Ethan went to go take a schwitz midway through that joke, and he didn't get the punchline. Because you know what? If he didn't turn it into that joke, I guess it would have been kind of awkward. Like, if he didn't follow it up with a joke about COINTELPRO and it was just about, Eldridge Cleaver trying to audition or something, sure, I guess that would be awkward.
It would be.
Yeah, so maybe Ethan missed it. Maybe he's just lazy versus
That's what
absolutely
I'm saying. That's what I'm
stupid.
saying. He just
I've been,
scribbled
literally
it off.
not in the room, though.
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think that flies over a lot. People don't understand who Fred Hampton is, right? People have no idea of this history, really. A lot of white people, I'm saying.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of.
Could the camera person not have found
Male
one
brain.
person who was having a big reaction to it? I feel like there had to be one.
He mentioned Ryan Coogler specifically, so that's why the camera went
He
to
said
him.
Ryan. He said he literally spoke to Ryan. But there he is. So good for Andy Sandberg. All right, let's take a quick break. Folks, a reminder, this program relies on its support from its members to function every day. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. And when you join themajorityreport.com, what happens is we give you extra content every day. And then, some extra content sometimes too. Not all the time, because we like to cap it at 6 hours or 7 hours a week. But sometimes we give.
I wish we
a
could
little more.
apathetically steamroll more of that content. Frankly,
I don't know what that means. Apathetically steamroll it.
Explain to me how to use it properly.
Well, you wouldn't apathetically steamroll that.
If you were complaining
content.
about
you
the
would
amount of
you would apathetically bulldoze that comment, because if you steamrolled it, it would simply flatten it. If you bulldozed it, you'd be pushing it out of the way.
I
think
choose
is what
my
you're trying to
words
say.
very carefully, Sam. And the Democratic performance was impotent and pathetic. You're scared. Your favorite communist, Claire McCaskill, lost her seat. And it's because of people like you who demonize those of us who support the president.
The conservative pushback is starting in North Dakota. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Get 10% off from your Just Coffee, which is delish. Today is Tuesday. That means it is the night that the Michael Brooks show happens. Michael, tell us more.
Nomiki Konst is talking about her great campaign for public advocate. We will also have a little announcement about something we're doing with regards to that. L.A. teachers strikes, a little illicit mini illicit history on strikes, and then we are going to, Dave Rubin, Turkey. There's a bunch of stuff going on, but we're going to do Mystery Science Theater.
Dave Rubin, Turkey?
Dave Rubin, Erdogan just wrote an op-ed in the New York Times about his plans after Trump pulls out. And
Dave Rubin's plans?
Well, if Erdogan wasn't Muslim, I think like a sort of fascist, essentially like choreographing his plans for ethnic cleansing in the New York Times would be sort of peak IDW. So that's how I connected in my mind, at least. Then we're doing Mystery Science Theater coverage of the announcement tonight.
And
so around 7:10 or so, we're starting Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel, patreon.com/TMBS for everything.
Jamie, the Intifada?
The government. We all hate it. But what happens if it just decides to go away? Recently, I joked on the Majority Report that would be cool. Others, like the anarchist collective Crime Think, have argued this point in earnest. In this very special patrons-only bonus, we read their article to that effect and point out some flaws in their reasoning. Because while we all agree with their vision of a self-organized stateless society, we have a long way to go before that's possible, folks.
Long way to go. Matt.
Literary Hangover. There's going to be a members-only hangover in the next couple of weeks, and then the next episode is going to be The House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
There you go. All right, folks, a quick break, and 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Yes, folks. The number is 646-257... 646-257-3920 is the number. Sometimes, like, you say the number so often, and then when you actually think about it, you forget about it. This story I've been following with some interest for a couple of years. One of the things that the Obama administration, and the name of the official in the education department slips my mind, and I think he's now on the Federal Trade Commission. One of the things that the Obama administration did that I thought was an unmitigated success and good thing was their crackdown on for-profit universities. Very recently, in fact, I think we talked about this last week, there was a holding in the D.C. Circuit Court that the education department could not reverse the payments that were owed students who had been ripped off by for-profit universities. Here's the scam with the for-profit colleges. A huge percentage. Now, look, they're not all horrific. Personally, I think none of them should exist. At the very least, the question is, should they be eligible for federal funds in terms of loans? And what the Obama administration did was basically start to actually scrutinize the accrediting firms of these colleges. So these colleges would get accredited by accrediting outfits, and that would mean that they were eligible to get student loans. And what they do, it's sort of like the radio business. In the radio business, the key was always holding people over that first break at 15 minutes. That's all that anybody cared about. You just got to hold people over that break, over the quarter hour, and that's how you get your ratings. At these for-profit universities, when it comes to loans anyways, they get their second, they're always looking for the next installment of the loan, because the loan gets dished out per semester or so. And they want to hold the students over to the next semester. And many of these students tend to be people who did not have the opportunity to go to college when they were younger. They've entered the workforce. They are looking specifically less so for, sort of broaden their liberal arts understanding, let's say, but want to enhance their careers. So there would be a very simple metric to measure the success of these schools. That is, what is the rate of return on this investment? You borrow $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to go to this for-profit university. How much money are you making more than you would on the trajectory you were making 3 years out, 2 years out, 5 years out? This is a fairly easy metric, but it's very hard to find that metric at these schools, oddly enough. And so the Obama administration had begun to crack down on them. In fact, two major universities, if I remember correctly, had to go down. ITT and I can't remember the name of the second one, but it was a very large enterprise. And so these for-profit universities, which are big business, publicly owned businesses, in fact, in many instances, you can buy their stocks. Their stocks started to decline because there was more and more scrutiny. And the vast amount, 80, 90% of their revenue comes from the U.S. government in the form of these loans. So here's an interesting thing. I haven't been able to find one that takes us to the present day, but this one captures the first 4 months following the election, starting in November of 16. You can see the day of the election. That's where the stocks are basically, and if you had gone a month or two earlier, if we could have found that, you would have seen a slow decline. Actually, if you had gone 16 months earlier, you would have seen a slow decline. And then look at that. They jump within literally a week of the election. The stocks jump by 10%. They go from 0 to 15%. before November 16th, before December 1st of 2016. And then they continue to skyrocket. Some go, by February, they're up 25, 30, 40% almost in their value. And if you look at the S&P 500, it's about 10%, by that time. So like 3 times. And I think these stocks have continued to skyrocket. Why is that? Well, because Betsy DeVos is the Secretary of Education, and these universities knew that essentially the cops had been told no longer scrutinize. You don't have to worry about this. In fact, the Trump administration now plans to release a draft of proposals to further deregulate higher education on Monday. That would be, I think it was was that yesterday? I don't know if they've released them yet. It's going to make it very easy for non-accredited, unvetted institutional providers to access federal student aid money. It's going to allow these entities to further outsource to things like, quasi-Berlitz outfits to provide education for its students. It's also going to get rid of the prohibition on outsourcing more than 50% of their programs to non-accredited providers. So you basically create a very small university that can meet accrediting standards, but then 70% of your revenue comes from people at non-accredited institutions. It also limits things like credit hour definition. It would let colleges and accreditors decide on how to evaluate a student's progress. Right. They can inflate credit hours. They can charge students significantly more money. And look, a lot of the people who sign up for these colleges, they are not terribly savvy. They know that they're looking around in the job force and they're seeing people who have college degrees do better than they're doing, and they want to help themselves and their family. And they don't have the time to go to a typical college. And so, that's the situation you have. You basically,
so desperation is great
well,
opportunity.
It's basically
it's a great market opportunity.
You have the education department basically just enabling con artists. Here's another one.
I'm a little disappointed. You'd think that Trump would have cracked down on them just out of pure spite because his was sued out of existence in 2010.
He can appreciate it. He can appreciate it.
Solidarity.
Listen, I can appreciate a good con.
Solidarity forever.
Here you can see the prison stocks also followed a similar trajectory where Trump's win helped the prison stocks
Private prisons.
skyrocket. So, yeah, well, private prisons, of course. So that's always fun. That's another added bonus. We're going to see thousands of people get saddled with student debt that in no way is going to help them, neither as a citizen or as in terms of return on investment. All right, meanwhile, let's
Do you remember how at the end of Trump U, if I recall the filings correctly, you get to meet him was one of the things that you were promised, and you would get a photo next to a cardboard cutout of Donald Trump.
It's like you could just pay an appearance fee, but you also have to go through like months of schooling before you actually get to see
But
him.
then you don't know, but you didn't meet him. It was literally a cardboard.
Didn't I interview a guy?
Was that David K. Johnston?
No. There was a guy who worked for Trump University.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was from Ring of Fire.
I don't know. I think we did that at
we
at some
played that.
vacation show. It was sort of
we tacked it on to something.
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite interview, but I was curious to see, and I thought maybe people would find it somewhat worthwhile. But this guy earnestly thought, like, I was in there to do good.
Yep.
Yeah, and then he ended up teaching one of didn't he know more
Right.
about real estate than the teachers?
Some weird, I don't know.
Put it
all right.
on your credit card. It's
So
worth
let's
it.
preview tonight, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Here is Chris Wallace. Now, as you know, tonight is premised on the idea that there's a national emergency. And I think what's happening in the White House right now is they're trying to figure out what are we going to say is the national emergency, right? It could be that, we have a national emergency because we have 14,000 beds filled with children. And we need to stop the flow of children, unaccompanied minors across the border. So we need to build the wall. Or it could be we are afraid that there's another caravan that is assembling 3,000 miles away, and they're starting to jog. And by the time they get here, they'll be running so fast we won't be able to stop them. Or should we just talk about what we've been talking about for months, which, of course, is this notion of 4,000 terrorists, would-be terrorists, stopped at the border. Let's see if that one will float. Send Sarah to Fox News Sunday and see if we can do this. Because if we can't do it on Fox News, then we're gonna have some real problems.
Let's have to look at it across the board. Let's talk about the wall, because there is no question that there has been a big spike in the number of family units coming across the border. The president talks about terrorists potentially coming across the border. And here is Secretary of Homeland Security Nielsen. Take a look.
CBP has stopped over 3,000 what we call special interest aliens trying to come into the country on the southern border. Those are aliens who the intel community has identified are of concern.
But special interest aliens are just who come from countries that have ever produced a terrorist. They're not terrorists themselves, and the State Department says that there is, quote, their words, no credible evidence of any terrorists coming across the border from Mexico.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico.
It's by air, it's by land, and it's by sea. It's all of the above. But one thing that you're forgetting is that the most vulnerable point of entry that we have into this country is our southern border, and we have to protect it. And the more and more that individuals
they're not coming across the southern border, Sarah. They're coming and they're being stopped at airports.
They're coming a number of ways. There's certainly, I'm not disagreeing with you that they're coming through airports. I'm saying that they come by air, by land, and by sea. And the more and more that our border becomes vulnerable, and the less and less that we spend time and money protecting it, the more that we're going to have an influx, not just of terrorists, but of human traffickers, drug inflow, and people that are coming here to do American citizens harm.
You know what the most porous border is, of course? That is the northern border. That is actually, I think, about 3 times the length of the southern border. And then, of course, the oceans, when we're talking about by sea.
Yeah, we got to secure our coasts from all those.
Where's the wall?
Terrorist pirates.
But even on Fox News, Sarah Huckabee Sanders gets pie-faced. And then we have NBC News reporting that only 6 immigrants in the terrorism database were stopped by the CBP, that is the Customs and Border Patrol, at the southern border in 2018. Now, these are just people whose names were on a federal government list of suspected terrorists. And like I say, Ted Kennedy was once on that list. He was not, it turns out, to be a suspected terrorist.
Allahu Akbar.
And what constitutes a suspected terrorist can range from like this person protested against Chevron destroying a forest. So this is an absurd statistic, and it's already been blown out of the water. But let's look into as we peruse the various possible justifications for a national emergency to be announced tonight, let's look to Fox and Friends to see what they're suggesting is the national emergency that we must declare to build a wall.
The question is not only of the drugs that are coming through, not only the potential gang members that are making their way through. There is danger. There's also families and humanitarian aid that's needed at the border. And then with the catch and release in courts saying we got to release these people and these kids within 20 days, they go into our school system. In our school system, last time there was unaccompanied minors, they flooded into Long Island. And I want to tell you, I can't tell you how many teachers said their classroom size doubled, and a lot of them don't speak any English. And suddenly they're trying to teach kids with other kids who are paying taxes, whose parents are paying taxes, the same subjects, and the other kids don't speak English. So in comes more teachers, in comes more tax dollars to find those more teachers, more classrooms, temporary classrooms, and they had no say in what was happening. These people are now being stacked up at the border in makeshift shelters.
There you go.
I don't believe that.
What don't you believe?
Actually, literally anything of what he just said.
Well, I will tell you this. Look, there are 50 million students in public schools as of the fall of 2018. That is, I think, across both elementary and high school. And every year, ladies and gentlemen, almost 65,000 students graduate from high school who are undocumented immigrants.
And they're all on Long Island?
Apparently.
Every single one of them?
All 65,000 of them are on Long Island.
Just like, they're all just like, they cross the border and then all of a sudden they're just like, I want to go to the mall.
And of course,
I want to go to Huntington.
Tomorrow, the answer on Fox and Friends to this problem will be to privatize the schools and drain money of them and give it to private schools. So color me a little bit skeptical about their concern.
Kilmeade complained that they actually got more funding in teachers.
Right.
But they just couldn't say, no, we don't want the more funding in teachers if it means we have to take in refugees.
That was precisely just looping back. I mean, they were incompetent and the lies are so extravagant and ridiculous that she got called out on Fox News. But I mean, we should do some fascism minding here because those are definitely like of the big lie varieties. Like those are not, hey, let's massage a statistic and do some spin and do all this crap that everybody does, of course. Those are like...
Well, Kristen Nielsen's statement was the worst.
Well, no, that's actually primarily what I'm pointing to because that sets the whole thing in motion. But she and Huckabee Sanders, that's fascism. It's incompetent. Fascism's so incompetent that it's not even succeeding in a Fox News segment. But
a lot of people laughed at the original Nazis, too.
Right. And they didn't, exactly. And as Ken Klippenstein pointed out, Hitler, the reason Hitler rose was because he wasn't fact-checked in Munich enough.
Didn't get enough Whopper.
He didn't get enough Pinocchios. But the truth is, that we got to note, that's fascism. Those are big lies.
Yep. Well, but it's starting with a grain of truth, right? Because people know it's in the air that these are real problems in schools, right? Class sizes are too big and they're under-resourced. And then they do a little fascist misdirection and blame it on the immigrants instead of, the ruling class.
Indeed.
Right.
Now, here we have, when we speak of fascistic lies that are being almost A/B tested on Fox and Friends, it seems to me. This is a clip number 4. They bring on Brandon Judd. He is the National Border Patrol Council. I don't know if is that the union? He's the union, right? The union president of the Border Patrol. And this union actually is one that is in favor of Donald Trump. They all can't be gems, folks. Sometimes when you have the most backward-assed of groups of people, they get excited because they get to knock some heads at the border.
Cop unions are not good.
But they brought on Fox and Friends this guy, Brandon Judd. And they brought him on, again, to A/B test what lie is going to float tonight. They tried the thing about the schools, and you almost heard everybody in the studio laughing, like, oh, Kilmeade's worried about public schools now. This is hilarious. But here is Brandon Judd.
A couple of things that have come out of Homeland Security and maybe the White House communications that maybe need to be further defined. NBC News head says this: only 6 immigrants in terrorism database stopped by CBP at southern border in the first half of 2018. They followed up on bigger statistics that were put out by Homeland. What's the truth?
Okay. That's absolutely ridiculous to say that we've only detained 6 people that were on the terrorist watch list. We're not going to make that information known. We have to keep that close to our to the chest. When you look at 9/11, all of those people
Pause it. Wait a
that
second.
took down.
I'm confused. Haven't we heard for weeks that it was 4,000? But is that part of like a false flag? We put out the 4,000. But it's somewhere between 6,000 and 4,000. But we got to keep.
This is the same thing they did with the Snowden revelations. We could never possibly talk about anything to validate our mass surveillance of Americans because that would jeopardize the whole thing.
But they've already put out all these figures.
Right.
We just heard Bridget
misdirection.
Whatever, Christian
exactly
Nielsen
those
say
exactly
those numbers.
Those numbers are wrong. Exactly.
The lies are for national security.
Yeah, the lies are for national security, which is totally not fascist.
Right. Do you understand that the numbers between 6 and 4,000, because if the terrorists knew the number was 3,387, they would have all our secrets. Go ahead.
We've only detained 6 people that were on the terrorist watch list. We're not going to make that information known. We have to keep that close to our to the chest. When you look at 9/11, all of those people that took down the towers right here in New York City, none of them were on the terrorist watch list. We don't know who's coming.
Guess what there wasn't before 9/11?
ICE?
Terrorist watch list. Yeah. That's why it was so hard for them to be on it. We didn't have a time machine. Go ahead.
New York City, none of them were on the terrorist watch list. We don't know who's coming in this country illegally. This, again, is illegal immigration. It's not legal immigration. If it was legal, they would be presenting themselves at the port of entry, and we would know exactly who they are.
This is absurd. So he said that we can't tell, we cannot tell how many people have been there, and we... because it would be revealing secrets, but we also don't know.
Not to mention, there is essentially no legal immigration for working class people.
I mean, the bottom line is half of supposed undocumented immigrants in this country came in legally and overstayed their visa. So they're just lying. He's just lying. But we'll see if that one floats. Lastly, in anticipation of tonight's broadcast, and we should say about tonight's announcement by President Trump that President Obama wanted to address the nation about immigration. What was this, 5 years ago? I don't even know what the date is today. And all the networks said, no, we're not interested. It's too political. Somehow they have found it within themselves to reverse themselves.
My fellow Americans, I'm announcing a complete ban on white migration to the United States.
There you go.
For too long, these male-brained monsters have emerged from caves and wreaked havoc across the globe. We can't stop all of them, but we can make a first step.
Here is, lastly, the NBC national security and justice reporter Julie Ainsley, who fact-checked Mike Pence's interview where he was claiming that that the border wall was a national emergency, a necessity on Stephanie Ruhle.
The caravan that would have arrived after the election, I didn't hear much of it, showing that this is not about a crisis. It's a political ploy. I want you to walk us through your reporting because it is so desperately important. As I mentioned, conservative Americans like my mom and dad who watch conservative media outlets are being lied to by journalists, by the White House, when they're told things like 4,000 terrorists are pouring in. And I want to share a bit of what Mike Pence said when Hallie asked him about it.
With regard to terrorists, we've seen more than 4,000 known or suspected terrorists attempt to come into our country through various means, but on the southern border.
But let me stop you on that number, because it is a misleading claim that's been fact-checked, as I believe you're aware, because that number is for all ports of entry, including airports.
Well, and that's what I was saying. It is from all ports of entry. But on the southern border, last year alone, 3,000 special interest aliens were apprehended trying to come into our country.
Okay, great. So we're having some champion wordsmithing here, Julia. Walk us through this. For those Americans who do want to live in a safe, positive environment and the fear-mongering that's going on out of our White House.
So, Hallie, what we have is a theory that is being pushed by the administration that has been fact-checked, and as we fact-check it, they change their talking points. So you're right, leading up to the midterms, it was the caravan. As we put more fact-checks about who these people were, how they were mainly asylum seekers and families, they've changed the message now to focus on terrorism. We heard the message over the weekend and from Sarah Huckabee Sanders last week that there were 4,000. We fact-checked that and found that only 6 in the first half of 2018 came through the southern border. More than that came through the northern border. Those are people on databases, or what's known as known or suspected terrorists. It doesn't mean that they are going to be arrested or charged with a terrorism-related crime. That's a higher bar. But these are people who have names on a database that are known to the United States and to our law enforcement officials. Now they're changing it again. They're going to an even lower category, which is known as special interest aliens, and saying that 3,000 of those cross the southern border in a year. That may be true. That's not data that I have. The data on the 6 is from the databases, the known and suspected terrorists. But what I will say about special interest aliens is they are even further from what we would categorize as a terrorist or anyone who we be able to arrest or charge in the United States on terrorism-related charges. These are simply people who raise a red flag, usually because of their travel patterns. I've followed special interest aliens for a long time. It could be someone who is simply from India who shows up at the southern border and they're not sure how they got there. It's more rare for someone outside of the Western Hemisphere to be crossing on foot. That just makes sense. If you look at the map of the world, it is much harder to get in that way. You've already taken a flight, so why wouldn't you just take a flight to the United States? So they raise a red flag and people do more digging on them. That doesn't mean that they raise to the level of a national security threat.
All right. Now, what's also hilarious about this, if you can click through that link, this is the Homeland Security page that says myth versus fact, known and suspected terrorists versus special interest aliens. And this is from yesterday. They posted this. In recent days, the terms special interest aliens and known and suspected terrorists have become more frequently used as part of the discussions about the federal budget and border security. These terms are not synonymous nor interchangeable, but are two separate terms that are commonly used in national security community to describe different types of potential threats. There are people in the Department of Homeland Security who are clearly upset that not only are they pissed that the White House is conflating these things, I think they're pissed that their own boss is conflating things.
Clearly a different person than the one who wrote the secret Nazi code post.
Yeah, exactly. This is we're watching the entire sort of apparatus of our government say, like, this announcement tonight is total BS. And here's the thing that's scary about it. The media is saying it's total BS. The government, broadly speaking, is saying it's total BS. And it's still going to happen, and there's no way to stop it. And that's what's the scary part, right? Where you start getting into this whole thing where it's like, everybody's going around doing this, or they're like, yeah, wink, wink. We all know. We pretend to work, they pretend to pay us type of situation.
Well, maybe they're not getting paid right now, and that's why they're slacking on their white supremacy.
That could be it. You're
You
going
want some fake stats to drum up a fake crisis, to racially scapegoat a group of minorities, to leverage your authoritarian government. You got to pay us.
It's going to cost.
The deep state finally bucks Trump because he's skimping on payments.
Indeed.
That would be actually how the deep state would finally take Trump down, is when he finally just gives them like the "you did some renovations in my hotel" treatment.
Exactly.
Yep. My brown bearded friend said the TSA agents didn't even remember to racially profile him on his way back from Los
Everybody's
Angeles.
getting so
They
sloppy.
look like they give like a very like poignant face. They're like, "Welcome to the country, Ahmed. No, I won't be looking at your bags. You look perfectly fine to me."
It's a true story, by the way.
Calling from a 602 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Armand from Vietnam, or in Vietnam, rather.
Armand in Vietnam. What's going on, Armand?
Hey, guys, I sent y'all a pretty pessimistic email earlier today, but it had one point that I kind of want to talk about on the cast. Basically, I want to talk about what kind of progress, because I'm kind of young and I don't fully understand what kind of progress we can expect in the future, assuming everything goes well. And also, I wanted to really thank you guys for all your dedicated work in 2018. Today, I became a majority reporter.
Oh,
so
well, thank you.
Kind of happy to
Nice.
throw that out. And a point that I also want to make is the irony that I feel like we're going to go through to correct all of the decisions that the current administration is making, while at the same time they're just pretty much correcting all the decisions that the Obama administration made. But basically, I want to focus on what can we expect to try and repair our relationships with our allies, and as far as addressing populism in the U.S., let's just do one at a time. As far as repairing our relationships with our allies, what can Dems try and do in the beginning of the next administration, assuming things go well?
Well, I think, I mean, it would be irrational, and maybe you have a better sense of this too, being outside the country. But I think living in the country, we have this perspective of Trump is an anomaly. There was a lot of things that went wrong in this election, that the majority of Americans don't subscribe to this guy's level of incompetence and insanity in many respects. I mean, I think, to the extent that any of it's genuine, I don't know, but obviously there are people who want less sort of involvement in other parts of the world. But in terms of just specifically that narrow question, into how will our allies and even those people who are not necessarily our allies perceive the United States, it would be irrational for them to assume everything's fine with this country even after Trump is gone. You know, it's like it is. It would be just, we are not reliable. Like, listen, as far as I'm concerned, if I had a rocket ship and I could put John Bolton and Donald Trump into that rocket ship and send it up into the sky and have it never return, or frankly, just a paper bag that I could light on fire.
There was a Max Romeo song called "Send the Devil." It was like "Chase the Devil to Outer Space."
But Bolton is in, Syria and Turkey, and no one's listening to him because it doesn't matter what he says, because nobody thinks that our government is operating properly. And you can develop maybe just like a little bit of confidence with some measure of competence in the future. But the fact is that the idea that this country could go from Obama to Trump indicates that this country is unstable. So even if the next president is, if it's Bernie Sanders, then it even looks even more unstable on some level, I guess. I guess if you were to put Mike Pence in, maybe there would be some notion, at least we can tell where these people are going. But we are, as a country, politically very unstable. And I think it's going to take generations before we lose that reputation
I have a slightly
even if things change, and there's no reason why other countries would view us consistently enough to draw any plans up and around.
I have I don't know if it's different, but I would just add, I think that the frame of the question is a little bit problematic, because I think because of the things Sam's outlining, but also just big picture, it's not going to go back to the way it was for reasons also that don't have to do with Trump necessarily. Like, China occupies it's kind of a cliche, but it's really true that they occupy a different place in the world than they did even during the last parts of the Obama administration, right? So the notion that you'll have, right, that's where you would know this well, where you are. So it's like, I think that, I don't know, it's still getting articulated, but Yanis Varoufakis, when he wrote this piece with David Adler announcing the Progressive International, they basically were like, look, you have this global far-right rise, and it is a trend. It's United States, Brazil, India, Russia. It's Brexit, France.
Italy.
It's strong in. Yeah, Philippines, Hungary. We know this. And then there's this craving to return to this, like, previous liberal order. And, people with a more left perspective would oppose the liberal order on a variety of grounds anyways, in terms of, the substantive merits of U.S. imperialism, frankly. But it's also like, it's not coming back. It's not how things are designed right now. It's not where the trend lines are going. So we've got to actually really be thinking collaboratively of, like, what the next model is. And people like Daniel Bessner arguing that the left model is going to come from much more sort of peer-to-peer civil society, bottom-driven up networks. And I think that that's true, and a better way to think of it than, because the United States.
But that's a different question.
No, it isn't a different question, because the United States is not, even with a more credible president and a more coherent foreign policy, is not going to occupy the same place in the infrastructure. So the notion of even just like in the United States having the credibility to direct global affairs that way is not happening.
But
it's not coming back.
There's a difference between not occupying the same relevance
I
and
understand.
being such a completely unpredictable character that you have to actually, like, distance yourself in a way that you can't even work with them, even in a lesser capacity. Right? Like, so.
Well, that's true.
It's not just the U.S.
That's true. That's true in some ways, but also just think of, like, the reality is like Europe still, even under Trump, has to work with us. That's what the infrastructure is. Africa, African countries that made a pivot to China from the United States or France, that was already happening. Like, there's just, I think very specifically what you're talking about is really relevant for something like the Iran deal and the lack of credibility we have by destroying that and lying about it. But as an example, the fact that Trump is still able to basically terrorize the Europeans and to by default pulling out of that deal as well because of threatening secondary sanctions, that power is diminishing and going away. So China's going to prop that deal up. India's going to prop that deal up. And it's going to just mean a different world.
Yeah.
So I just am saying, like, I agree with you. Of course the credibility is
and
shot.
This is
but the whole playing field is
happening
changing. And a president's going to need to understand that more structurally.
Yep.
But what's nuts to me is that this is all happening at the same time that China is doing projects like the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yes, exactly.
And strategically, militarily. Did you know that most of our military communications to China go through a fucking fax machine?
Yes.
I'm sourcing this from The Economist a couple of weeks ago, but that's just, it's nuts to me at a time when we should be communicating with China. Rather than that, we're starting these nonsensical attacks and just.
Well,
it's
fax
just,
machines.
and it's so scary to me that.
Send the jokes.
Sorry?
The fax machines are the best way to send the jokes, is my understanding. You can do the pictures.
But I don't want to take up too much time. Just one more final point I wanted to make is as someone who struggles to describe things that I feel like super emotional about, I've never heard someone put my feelings into words the way Dee did yesterday. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, Dee. And I just like to throw an extra vote in for her to definitely have a podcast or at least a blog we can subscribe to. But But yeah, that's all I got, guys. Thanks so much for the call.
Appreciate the call. Thanks, Arma.
I have a question. Do you ever think about comparisons to the British Empire and the collapse of it? Like America's
Yes.
basically the British Empire with a lot more natural
They're
resources
passing
and population.
the baton to China.
It's like
in some
weird
ways.
because yeah, exactly.
And the difference is, as far as I understand, that I think the baton from the British to American Empire is like the only time that hasn't happened violently.
Right.
So people need to think a lot more carefully about how this transition is happening.
Well, wide angle, like I always take the wide angle view on things generally, but if you think about neoliberalism not just as an ideology but as a period within capitalism, it's very clear that this particular phase is just about over. It is reaching a crisis point, and we're going to transition to a new phase, maybe of capitalism, maybe of post-capitalism, but until that happens, you're going to see a lot more chaos as we don't know what's going to come.
Well, I think what's really...
And crisis, and Trump is a result of crisis, as is the wave of right-wing populism around the world.
Well, it's kind of scary, though. I mean, all of that is scary, but I think like China has an authoritarian capitalist model that has a huge amount of roadway ahead of it. So I think these contradictions are reaching a point faster in places that are already developed. China has a lot of room to develop essentially fascism if you really think about what they're doing. I could see a world that's a hybrid of Amazon and the People's Republic of China.
Oh, yeah. Everyone thinks that China is communist. No, what China shows us is that capitalism and democracy do not need to come in the same package.
Exactly. Right.
Calling from a 647 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Sebastian calling from Canada.
Who is it? Ashton.
Sebastian. Hey, so are you actually going to run on a libertarian ticket?
I don't know. I mean, the idea came up a couple of days ago, so I haven't really had a full time to talk to my family about it.
Is it safe to say that you're sort of in the exploratory committee phase?
I think I'm in
This whole show has just kind of been leading up to that?
Well, that's possible. I like to think of myself in the pre-exploratory. I'm exploring the exploratory phase.
All right. Well, I wanted to offer you just a little bit of advice on how you should do this.
All right.
And tell me if you think it makes any sense. I think that you should describe yourself on Twitter as the last libertarian. And you should go about this from a kind of like left-wing libertarian, perspective. And go, I don't know if you know anything about political terminology in Europe.
Right.
Where the word Democrat means right-wing, and then libertarian is like a sort of socialist anarchist.
Yes, we've had that has come up on occasion.
No, don't tell me about it.
But anyway, yeah, you should try to do like the reverse Dave Rubin.
Yes, I think
and
that
claim that like you're the.
I think we would have to, if I was going to run, and I will, like I say, I have to consult with my family. But then we would probably have to sort of reverse engineer a slight change in perspective. But I also sort of am intrigued by the notion of just saying I'm a libertarian without having to do any of that other work that you're talking about, and just go up and maintain my exact same politics and my exact same branding, as it were. And maybe I could say I'm the new libertarian or the last
neo-libertarian.
Neo-libertarian.
I'm just interested in ideas. Things happen at the idea
Exactly.
level.
But I mean that's the thing with these guys, right? Is like they always claim, no, I'm not that kind of libertarian. I'm this
That's
kind
right.
of libertarian.
That's
So
true.
You could fit right
Do you remember
in.
Greg?
That's true.
You remember that night? I don't want to conjure his name,
Right.
but do you remember I am what is
No,
called
I think
a
that's
consequential post-textualist libertarian. Can you play the Milton
I do
Friedman
like
clip
the
and let
idea.
me talk for 4 hours, please?
I do like the idea, Sebastian, of saying that I am just interested in exploring libertarian ideas. And so that in the event that I am kept out of the debates, I can wait for my friends in the IDW to protect my rights to examine ideas.
Do you remember when Greg would call? I
appreciate the
remember
call.
Greg would be like, I'm consequence libertarian, and I agree with you that the Ukrainian plane that was shot out of the sky was probably not a false flag. It was probably done by militias. And he'd be like, oh, okay, Greg. But my problem with you is there is a technology in Singapore that could bring all of those people back to life through nanotechnology. And I'm wondering why you oppose that. Because you oppose libertarian ideas. Oh, God. He would always call it the best thing. Solution to Jordan and Lebanon. You could put Palestine in.
Yeah, wait, what's it?
How is it just to put Palestine in Jordan?
If we made
if
you had driverless cars and you had them go back and forth on the border of the West Bank.
So there's real security concerns for Israel, but here is my solution. What if you gave Palestinian children iPad and they could take Khan economy classes? This is a solution. Why can't... No, please, can I have another 45 minutes? By the way, you're welcome. I think I bullied Greg off the show.
Jonathan Armstead. Sam, I think you're onto something with your take that right-wing media looks to constantly attack young progressive women. The AOC article about her going by Sandy was beyond the pale, but there's a history to this, whether it's Ruby Bridges, Maya Lin being attacked for creating the Vietnam War Memorial, your friend Janine, Sandy Flake, or teen Vogue editor Laura Duca. Old white dudes seem to get their jollies off on attacking these women. It's like that scene of The Hunger Games where Donald Sutherland says of Jennifer Lawrence's character that she became a beacon of hope for the rebellion and she has to be eliminated. Like I always say, life imitates sci-fi. There is no doubt in my mind that for right-wing media, beating up on young women is a ratings winner. And here is Rush Limbaugh basically saying, hey, Sam, I see your point, and I'm going to raise it 1 unit.
Speaking of that, it has become apparent to me that Pelosi and Schumer do not like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. If you noticed, CNN, Chris Cillizza, our old buddy Chris, formerly of the Washington Post, now
Pause it.
CNN.
Now, the problem with this is like they somehow Rush did not get the memo. Like he's like, look, that might be good for you youngins to say that she doesn't have the credibility and she's Sandy, but my peeps still get just disgusted at the idea that they would actually have to press number 2 for English on their phones. So I'm going to remind you that she Cortez, Ocasio-Cortez. There you go.
CNN, Chris Cillizza, our old buddy Chris, formerly of the Washington Post, now over at CNN, has just written a devastating piece about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, saying she doesn't know what she's talking about, saying she's dead wrong about everything. She has no facts. She poses a grade. There's no question that piece is the product of Pelosi and Schumer working the media. Because I'm telling you, I predicted this, that the Democrat leadership is not hip to this young bunch of millennials pouring in here and some of these other radicals. They're not hip to it. I mean, they run that party, and they run the American left, and they're not going to let some young uppity come in here and upset the apple cart. It's like anybody else that holds power. They're not just going to cede it, C-E-D-E, for those of you who real, they're not going to cede it to a bunch of newcomers that don't know what they're doing.
I mean, he may...
he think he's actually correct about some of those dynamics.
Well, I would imagine most people don't like to give up their power. Most people don't like the idea of, a junior backbencher essentially becoming probably the single most popular political figure in the country. I mean...
And not just their power, like their political alignment, because she is trying to realign the party.
Yeah, I suspect that they have less invested in the ideology than they do in the idea that they're going to lose power.
well, not just the ideology, but like, you know, the people who pay them money, all the
it's
patronage,
it's just power.
favors.
Like if she had come in and she was a rock star and just, I don't know what the ideology would be, but she was the you know, attracting the same amount of interest, and somehow was I don't know.
Well, there's a bit of a wrinkle in this, right? Like I'm somewhere in between both of you on this, because I think Obama shows both of what you're saying. So on one hand, where I think you're right, Sam, is like obviously Obama came in and the establishment was mostly totally enthusiastic and excited and very thrilled that this promising, charismatic young person was changing the party, right? And then obviously the Clinton people hated him because he threatened their power, and it wasn't in any way an ideological battle. There wasn't much daylight at all. But conversely, I would say that, you know, you wouldn't have gotten, like, the Tom Dashells of the world wouldn't have broke for Obama, and Harry Reid wouldn't have been so gung-ho about him running for president if he also had, say, a significantly more leftward agenda. It was because of that lack of ideological daylight that they felt comfortable realigning it, because it didn't jeopidize the campaign contributions and the ideology.
And it didn't realign at all. Like, it's not like Obama came in and severed their connections to Wall Street.
Well, no, it did it realigned the dynamics of the leadership of the party and patronage networks, which is what you guys are talking about to some extent.
Right.
But so that's why I'm somewhere in the middle of this conversation. I think my point is, she's got the Obama thing in terms of she's charismatic, she's great, blah, blah, blah. But she also represents like just even the complete repudiation of Clinton, and to a significant extent the Obama administration. That does implicate the ideology of it.
Potential patronage network, for lack of a better term, just simply does not align with anybody who's in power now.
Well,
I mean, so it's very hard to sort of, and that is probably a function of ideology, but it's conceivable to imagine Beto. But I'm saying like a Trump in the Republican world, where it's like he wasn't going to come in and do anything politically that was really going to be he was completely outside in terms of the Patriot Network, which is why he represented a threat to them, even though ideologically.
I don't think there's exactly it's funny. The closest analog to the Democratic Party maybe would be Bloomberg. Like he would bring in his own people, maybe, because he's got his. I doubt it. I don't think that there's an analog to Trump in the Democratic Party. I don't think that exists.
No, despite some op-eds I may have seen today saying exactly that.
What's that?
Calling AOC the Trump of the left.
Well, of course.
Oh, well, those are just the typical fucking idiots who write those op-eds. They're just brain dead.
Secret identity politics. Two things. Isn't there a possibility that the Supreme Court does a Bush v. Gore and says Trump can have the wall, but don't use this as a precedent in the future unless it benefits Republicans? Yeah, of course. But I don't think these cases are going to come up. I mean, frankly, this is what I think is going to happen. He's going to announce that he's going to make the wall. And they're just going to slow walk it. They're just going to slow walk it because they don't care about making the wall. They just want to say that they're making the wall. As for gerrymandering, all the Republicans I know really like the system where their votes count more than everybody else's. They're a-holes who argue in bad faith. I live in Ohio. I don't see a way to beat them. These Republicans trying to talk about terrorists coming over the border sound like me when I'm trying to confuse my boss. Very legal and very cool. This is good. Bill de Blasio just announced that health care will be guaranteed for all residents in New York City. I don't know how he plans to do that.
Including undocumented.
Including 300,000 undocumented immigrants.
So that was I feeling good about voting for de Blasio moment.
This is the music for the feeling good about de
Blasio. Feeling good about de Blasio.
What's Trump going to call him when he runs for president?
Dumb beanstalk guy. Jack in the Dumbstock. Jack in the Dumbstock.
Frankenstein. Frankenstein.
Daddy de Blasio.
Actually, Frankenstein's actually not
Calls
bad.
him yoga.
Yoga. Stretch.
Winnipeg Craig. Cenk Uygur is apparently going to New York in mid-January for a No Miki fundraiser. Maybe invite him to guest on the show. I'd love him to soak up a little socialist worldview while he's visiting. I will
Of
send him
course.
What's Aleppo? Could you please give your argument for why taxation is not theft? Thanks. Love show.
Property is theft. Boom.
I mean,
said your mom.
It's not theft because it is taxes. I mean, like, I don't know how else to tell you that. Like, you could define, it is the government giveth and the government taketh away. It's not like what you have is not a function of the society as it exists when you were born into it. Their property is simply a construction of the state. We know this because there are propertyless societies, or there have been. And so the state basically says, we're going to enforce your property rights. But the get, that's the give, and the get is you're also going to support the state and in its monopoly of force.
Yeah, it's a protection racket. So they should probably take the deal that they're offered.
Yeah.
Because the other deal is not as favorable for them, right? Like, the bourgeois state was founded to uphold property rights and capitalism. And in exchange, they have to give at least some small amount back in taxes that the government then redistributes.
Well, the other issue is that without the taxes, the money you have would be worthless.
Do you want to? Is it?
It would just be worthless.
It's less sophisticated, but as you describe it, it's like, do you think there's some way in which if we exist because of all of these things that the government provides, the whole context that you always say, like, what about the roads that we get to, our free exchange of ideas on, or whatever. I mean, in some ways, it's almost analogous to saying, like, is it theft to have to, like, pay for the coffee that you just got? In a way, like, it's just like you're just paying for a service that's been provided for you.
I'll add a slightly
right. That's kind of how I see it.
And you do have a choice. You can leave the country.
Yeah. I mean, you could live totally off the grid.
Well, the slightly different
extent.
wrinkle I was going to say is it's to the extent that it is theft, it's because the government isn't democratically legitimate.
Right.
Right.
That's true. That is right. That's a good point.
Is it theft when you create a surplus that your boss then takes away and uses for their own profit accumulation?
Anybody asking this question wouldn't agree with that, but
But that is true.
Well, this is why I kind of like the IM that framed it in the sense of taxes, because that's something that right-wingers might understand a little better.
I remember a hardcore libertarian upstate to me. I was buying a peach tree from him, which of course was not a non-hybrid peach tree, and he looked at my car, which was I think a 2002 Subaru, and he said, "Is that your car?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you own it?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "No, you don't. You just lease it from the state." I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, you lease it from the state. It's registered. The state just registered it to you." I'm like, "Okay."
Really? That says something.
I was like, "No."
Because I was thinking you'd be the 1 in 1 million who'd be like, "Oh, really?
No.
How about we spend the rest of the day hashing that out?
I was like,
I'll leave my daughter at daycare, no problem."
I'd like my peach tree and to go now, please.
Well, that's the healthy, normal
response. But the point
response.
being that, like, look, when theft involves stealing something without, or taking something without someone's permission, and the point is that the money is not yours. The money is not yours. The government makes it and says you can use this to exchange things, and we give it value. Listen, if you have no American dollars, guess what? You don't have to pay a tax on it. if you don't use American dollars, you do not have to pay tax to the U.S. government. You won't be able to buy anything here, but you won't have to pay tax. It's just that you're getting to use American dollars. And there's a what do you call that when you go on a website, right? Like you're agreeing to our terms. That's basically it. You've given your consent.
Well, to be fair, you really can't opt out of the system, but that's the same thing that I would say to libertarians when they tell me that I can just opt out of capitalism. Like, okay, I guess I could starve to death, but that's not a very good option.
You could opt out at least of the American system.
Is there a place in the world I could go to where I don't have to sell my labor in order to survive?
No, I'm talking about if you don't want to pay taxes to the U.S. government.
Well, yeah.
I don't know that there's a place where you could get away with selling
depends
your
what
labor.
lifestyle you want.
I mean, I guess it's
stipulate that this is a peach tree.
Dragon
drive
Slayer.
it on a road.
Sam, when it comes to terrorists, the important question is which is greater, 6 or 0? USA in the UK. Sam, I've changed my TYT subscription to a Majority Report subscription. Loving you all. Well, we're going to give you one of these. I'm an American in the UK. Trump is hated here and worried about the state of America. Don't blame you. Adam Cokehead, is there a way that Trump can build the wall? Do you think Ann Coulter and Rush see the writing on the wall and are trying to find a way to explain their audiences that they are ditching Trump? It's an unreasonable demand. No, they're not going to ditch Trump. Letter carrier. Sam, there's an elephant in the room vis-a-vis Sunday. Coming from New England and you chose... I know. I wasn't going to bring this up. Coming up from New England and chose halfway through a TFB playoff game to have your event. Will you be giving Patriots scoring updates throughout the show? Well, you've given up the ghost, but yes, I will be. I will be actually flashing the Patriots on the screen. We have a special.
Gosh, I hope they lose so much.
Oh my God!
I hope that we get like, we have to announce that Tom Brady's ACL is missing.
Football is counter-revolutionary.
I was like, Matt's like, Tom Brady is in a coma. Tom Brady got significant brain damage. I guess longitudinally he definitely got brain damage and is getting it. Yes,
it's a problem with potential guest. We're not going to really have. We're not going to be guest heavy on this show, but
I'm not going to be there. So
no, there you go.
Gronk was supposed to be there.
Yeah, Gronk was supposed to be there.
Bill Belichick was going to come and apologize for supporting Donald Trump, but he had to back out.
Yeah,
JJ,
I didn't like what he said about LeBron.
JJ Cool. I love Jamie and don't want to get you off track, but I have one question. In an anarchical society, who mediates disputes and upholds the rules?
Community councils. Also, I'm not a full-on anarchist. I just want to make that clear. I'm a communist with anarchist characteristics. So I'm not against some kind of like federation of these, various local government communities. There's some things that need to be done on a global level, like, climate standards, etc. I think most people who hang out on my end of the spectrum would be cool with something like that.
So how is that terribly different from what we have now?
You don't have capitalism.
No, okay. All right. But in terms of the system of government.
Oh, I mean,
could you take over the UN with communists? Make that really powerful somehow?
I'm going to take some notes on that. Maybe.
That's what they were.
I'm not talking about the economic system. I'm talking about the
political system?
The governing.
No, the political system. I would like to see it less centralized, but sure, there are definitely some similarities. I'm not against representative government. I would go with the Noam Chomsky line of anyone claiming a right to some kind of power or state power needs to justify that claim and remain accountable to the people who put them there.
That guy's such a poser.
John John Cleveland, the segment with Millhiser was very depressing. Speaking of someone living in a crazy gerrymandered state, how do you and the team personally deal with feelings of hopelessness in these trying times? Feels like the slight optimism of winning the House is petering out a bit. What I try to do is get 2 hours of sleep a night. That's the way I deal with it. And then I come in and I take a nap for 20 minutes in the morning.
I get like 6 and game a lot.
There you go.
I do really think it's important to do other things that are outside of politics to the extent you can. Friends, family, books, whatever, sports, whatever. Exercise helps a lot, legitimately.
Well, I find not sleeping is really the recipe for me. Bravo-matic. Any drinking game phrases for tonight's 30 Minutes of Hate other than wall, perhaps slats, or invasion?
MS-13.
The thing is, tonight is not going to be fun. Because it's all going to be written, and, Stephen Miller is going to write something horrific, and that's basically it. It's not going to be fun. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Who is this?
Hey, it's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. How you doing?
Bro Flamingo. Pretty good. How you doing?
I'm all right. Happy New Year, by the way.
You too.
I just got a couple of things to say. The first one is, this is kind of neither here nor there, but I'm sure you guys saw after the Weekly Standard got closed down, and, what I really found interesting about this was, when it was finally announced it was going to close down, Bill Kristol was whining and stuff, and you had a kind of the quote-unquote liberal establishment media type talking about, the moderate voices of republicanism is closing down. What a shame.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good voice.
And, thank you, by the way. But, and unfortunately, I didn't have my air sickness bag on standby. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, well, people in the know do, but, the Weekly Standard was basically, what was it, Coke money that basically funded this? Or, basically like just, the neocon types literally just propping this paper up.
Yeah.
And the Weekly Standard was basically, I guess, like one of the worst welfare to work schemes I've ever read on the planet. So, it's just like, it was very, very sickening just to see all this stuff. And it's this is why I listen to you guys. Because it's just like, man, are you kidding me? And I think a lot of people, and what's really interesting about this is that Trump is so bad. I mean, let's be clear. He's horrible. But, I look at the media, and you always see these types like, oh, well, at least in George W. Bush's days, it wasn't like this, whatever. I mean, George W. Bush was awful.
Awful.
he was just so awful.
But he had a certain degree of class. He gave Michelle Obama the Butterfinger. And you're telling me that doesn't make your heart move? It was American?
And, but basically, I really saw that. And I just really feel like, people from like the New York Times, stuff like that, I would really, really, really respect these guys more. Even the cable news outlets, instead of just putting on the never Trumpers, because, they have no constituency. These guys have no constituency whatsoever. Also with the advent of Paul Ryan finally stepping down, whatever, Sam, I think it's kind of clear. Don't get me wrong, the background players are still there. But the lip service to, balanced budgets and, conservatism and this, that, and the third, that's finally gone out the window. Because, to truth be told, Ryanism had no constituency either.
None. But I am not convinced that every single part of what we knew as the Republican Party 3 years ago can't come back literally overnight. Literally overnight. It won't be the same. Things won't be the same just simply because because I think of the younger generation and at least a portion of the left was moving more left anyways. But in July or June of 2016, I was saying, if Donald Trump wins, we're all going to have to like Jonathan Chait again. And I was wrong about that insofar as those people did not get the prominence. It ended up being the never Trumpers, right? Like we have to
Right.
John Kasich is a really serious guy. I'm sorry. John Kasich is a right-winging lunatic. And it's just that he happens to be not Trump. Bill Kristol was cheerleading war crimes, literally cheerleading war crimes.
Exactly.
And those people, the mainstream has a certain amount of respectability. The difference that exists now, as opposed to, let's say, the Bush era, is just that the left was growing since really 2008. And there is just simply another sort of slice of the media culture. I think in part because of technology too, frankly.
Right.
So that.
Also, I do want to say. I'm sorry. I just want to say too.
Go ahead.
I just want to say too. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off real quick. I'm just real quick. But to your point though, Sam, I think when you guys mentioned this before, you know what I'm saying, and it bears mentioning again, where the media is desperately looking for some quote unquote normal Republicans.
Absolutely.
Just, to get back to the status quo.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. I appreciate the comment.
Yes, sir.
Right. And this is what I mean by technology. The left is helped by the technology that we have had. The far right is too on some level. But the left is helped much more because there was never going to be an ability for the left to get on broadcast media or bigger media platforms. There just wasn't. Not because of the audience, but because of the economics of it. We see examples all the time. And this is the fundamental mistake that people make about ratings and whatnot. People think if it gets ratings, it necessarily airs, and that is not the case. That is not the case. You can look at what happened at MSNBC, and ratings were sort of like were inhibiting what I think they wanted to do. High ratings were inhibiting what they wanted to do. So the technology, I mean, could you just imagine this, the Trump world. I mean, it really is just what happened during Bush, but imagine this world now where there is no Twitter, there is no YouTube, there is no mechanism to for people to hear shows like this or the Intifada or the Michael Brooks show or these other there's no mechanism. That's what it was like during the Bush administration. YouTube was started in 2004.
There were some really good zines, though, that you could get if you went to these very specific places.
And there were blogs. But that was basically it. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine. But now there's like an entire culture that you could consume media every day, 24 hours a day, and not have to come across anybody who is crediting Bill Kristol as being, but that was literally impossible 15 years ago.
Yeah, they say podcasts are the new left-wing talk radio.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I think YouTube has the opportunity for that as well. But there was, until Air America, there was really no opportunity for it. And it was also, I think, too late in a contracting industry with people who were too stupid to understand what where the value proposition was. This is literally, this is what you would have seen. Now, I don't know that you would have had, frankly, AOC without the new technology that we have now. Frankly, the desire for such type of politics was there, but you wouldn't have had AOC. But if you did, by some fluke of the imagination, who would the left voices be on television? It would be Whoopi Goldberg. it would be Whoopi Goldberg. And that would be it. That would be the one that the left got, that voice. And here is what the left, I'm in air quotes, would be saying. Just imagine there was no other place to respond to this.
For what?
Warren. For the Democratic to be the nominee for
let
president.
me just say this about Ocasio-Cortez. She just got in on Thursday. She was sworn in.
Yes. Yeah.
And she's very opinionated, which we like. We like opinionated women. But it is very, very difficult when people make accusations where you say, you know, the Democrats have done nothing. The establishment of the Democrats have done nothing. And I just want to throw this out to you. John Lewis wasn't sitting still.
Right.
Dianne Feinstein wasn't sitting still.
What?
There are a whole bunch of people in the Democratic Party who have been busting their asses to make sure that women get what they need, people get what they need, children get what they need. So you just got in there, and I know you got lots of good ideas, but I would encourage you to sit still for a minute and learn the job. And, you know, and just, you know, because there are people in that party who have been working their tails off for
and
this country.
They know a lot.
And they know a lot.
They've been
And you could learn some stuff from them. And I just feel like, you know, you don't have to be born into it. You don't have to know it when you step out. But before you start pooping on people and what they've done, you got to do something too.
Well, she hasn't done
That's well said.
Well,
That's
Very well said. Very well said. It's funny that she brings up John Lewis, because I imagine when John Lewis, before he was a congressman, had some critique of what was going on in government and had some critique of what the Democratic Party was doing. In fact, I would imagine there is a whole host of activists and community leaders and protesters who have critiques of what Democrats and Republicans or any parties, any members of any party or our government is doing. And I have a strong suspicion that Whoopi Goldberg, well, I don't know, but I'd be curious as to what Whoopi Goldberg would have said 50 years ago when John Lewis, part of the civil rights movement, is critiquing what's going on with the government. I mean, you know, like the this is the olds. This is the olds just protecting their turf. And the idea that anybody would be like, you're hurting the feelings of Dianne Feinstein. Are you serious? Really? But again, 15 years ago, that's what you would hear from the nominal left.
Well, it's also the rich defending their turf, right?
I think that's part of it. I don't think Whoopi Goldberg is afraid of her money being expropriated. I think in her mind, it really is more just feeling. I think it's generational. I mean, she or to the extent that it is cultural and maybe informed by having money in that respect, it accelerates the process of being old.
And not just her having money, but like, what are major networks willing to pay you to say? You know, there's certainly a range there that doesn't go that far to the left.
There's nothing that Whoopi Goldberg couldn't say on that show about AOC. I mean, she couldn't maybe swear, but she couldn't say, there's not a moment where I would think that if Whoopi Goldberg said, AOC is great, the Democrats need to get on the ball, I agree with everything she says times 3, that she would not hear from anybody at the network about that. No way. It just doesn't happen. Like on a show like that, there's nobody at ABC going like, oh, Whoopi, you're getting a little bit out of control. It's more just like she's just, you know, swims in that ocean. And
sort of self-selecting too.
Yes.
You'd select yourself out of it if she was in the habit of making.
But I don't think
like
that there's anything that's going to be said on The View that is going to in some way raise the the concerns of, I don't know that you could get somebody, Jamie, I don't think that you would get offered a job on The View.
God damn it.
But
that was my plan.
But if you, if Whoopi Goldberg called you up and said, Jamie, tell me what to say tomorrow, and you said it, and she said it all, I don't think she would feel in the slightest bit her job be threatened.
That'd be pretty cool. Whoopi, my lines are open.
There you go. I wonder if Whoopi Goldberg would have a problem with Reverend Barber criticizing what's going on in the Senate and the House.
Well, we also have to look back in time, right? Because this kind of culture has an end, and it clearly is ending in its hegemony. It also had a beginning.
I am fully on board with my theory about the generational, that is one of the big movers here. Every day that passes, I get more convinced of it.
But you want to look back before the neoliberal era. I mean, Eugene Debs ran for president, and people reported on that seriously. The Overton window has moved so far to the right. We got a lot of work to do, but I think the left now, like this, especially the generation of millennial leftists or whatever, have much more in common with the old left, like the labor left of the 30s, than the new left of the 60s.
Here is, I guess he's bishop now, William Barber, critiquing Mitt Romney's op-ed, wherein Mitt Romney says that Donald Trump is rude, but I love his policies.
The problem with what Romney is saying is basically saying, I disagree with the moral way Trump is saying things. And if you look at the scriptures, look at Jesus, the prophets, they didn't criticize people based on what they said. They criticized them based on what they did. Jesus talked about the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to preach good news to the poor. He said, woe unto those religious and political leaders who leave undone the weightier matters of the law, which are justice and mercy and faithfulness and love. Isaiah said, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights. So Romney, in essence, is saying if he was just nicer with his words, I'm still in agreement with his policies. And that's dangerous because there were nice slaveholders with their word. There were nice segregationists. There were nice people that held women back during the days that women didn't have the right to vote. Dr. King got a nice letter when he was in the Birmingham jail. And people said, if you would just be nice and wait. But Dr. King said, well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about policies. And so it's concerning. Trump is engaged in mother-child killing policy, immigration policies. Romney said he isn't against that. He's engaged in mother-child family killing, health care denial. That's policies. And so you can be nice all you want. We don't just need a kinder, gentler meanness. We need the policies to stop. So on one hand, for you to say, I disagree with this word, but on the other hand, I agree with this immoral wall and immoral immigration policy, it's anemic. It's void of any power. And it actually, in some ways, more dangerous because I actually would rather Trump be honest about where he is on policy than for somebody to smile and say, be nice, but still agree with the negative policies.
All right, we got time for one more call. Calling from a 210. Folks, I apologize. We have people who have been on the phone for 90 minutes almost, multiple people, and we have 30 calls. You're calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. Oh, sorry. How are you?
Okay, sorry about that. This Saturday, organizingforbernie.com will be holding meetings to show Bernie how much his supporters want him to run. There's been some rumors that he may announce his run for presidency at this time. I'm not guaranteeing you it's going to happen, but originally they were just house parties. Now they're having a live stream that'll be shared during the parties, which will include top organizers from the network and some of the the Sanders' most ardent supporters, explaining why he remains the best choice, not only for progressive voters, but for the Democratic Party, the nation, and the world. All of the parties will have a live stream at the same time. So if you're on the East Coast, they start at 4 p.m. West Coast parties start at 1 p.m. I'm already starting to check the Sunday shows to see if Bernie's going to be booked on many of these programs, so they can give me a little bit of a clue if he's going to announce.
Wow.
So I hope he announces on Saturday, but if not, then sometime soon.
That's going to implicate the live Majority Report show.
No, it's on Saturday. Your show's on Sunday, right?
That's right.
No, yeah, Saturday for the Sanders meeting, Sunday for the Majority Report.
Right, that's right. But I'm saying that's if.
But
if
you'll talk about it,
right?
You'll
exactly.
talk about it if
That's
he
my
announces,
point.
obviously, right?
Don't jinx
Okay.
it.
All right, sorry about that.
All right. Appreciate the call, John.
Okay, good.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Got to jump. All right, appreciate the call. There you go. All right, folks. Apologies. No, people are hanging on. Going to do a couple IMs and then skedats. Let's see. A little Gleason. AOC was second in a global science fair in high school, just like Palin. What? AOC was talking about a more conservative version of the tax system between FDR and Reagan is the same as not being able to name a newspaper. Oh, this is Max Boot. God, will you pull up this dumbass thing? Look, I told you, look, these people are worthless. There is no value to them. And the problem is that those people who have platformed, these never Trumpers, I'm not saying that they should be, taken out and flogged. I'm just saying, let them find their own constituency. Let them actually bring something to the table. All they're doing is they are using your platforms, your praise, your retweets, whatever it is, to launder Republican talking points into your networks. AOC shouldn't approach her facts the way Trump does. That's just absurd. That's just absurd. Max Boot, Ocasio-Cortez reminds me of Sarah Palin. I wonder why that might be. Oh, they're both women, of course. Another talented young communicator who made a big splash in national politics before having her lack of knowledge painfully exposed. This is stunning. This is stunning.
Washington Post.
I mean, the way it gets by an editor is by everybody who clicked on Max Boot when he said, I just found out the Republicans are racist. In 10 years, Max Boot is going to be like, I look back on those times that I thought AOC was the same as Sarah Palin, and I realized, I was hoodwinked. Give me a break. I mean, this is so disingenuous. There's no possible way. There's no possible way someone who would be able to work a word processing program could say that there is anything even remotely similar between Sarah Palin and AOC other than the fact that they're both women, they're involved in politics. Sarah Palin, her national prominence was because John McCain plucked her out of literally nowhere as a way of placating a base that did not like John McCain. That's why Sarah Palin got prominence. AOC did not have a crane. She did not. She represents a portion of the base of the Democratic Party. But
they do both represent a kind of populism, though, right?
I mean, I guess.
Is right-wing populism? Some people say that it's not. It's all phony, but I feel like we need to take it seriously on its terms.
Well, I guess if right-wing populism leads you to become a TV star and go around and exploit people for talking fees, but that's the only sort of populist vision that Sarah Palin represented, as far as I can tell. I mean, to the extent that she had any populist fervor, it lasted for 3 months. And then she quit her job.
Yeah, the reason right-wing populism is scary is mainly a function of right-wing elitism willing to use right-wing populism.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be clear on Sarah Palin's moment. Like when she was actually doing something. She quit her job 5 months after losing the election. She quit her job midway through her term because she claimed that she could do more for the Republicans by not being in office. This is a con man or con woman, to be fair. That is a grift. There's nothing else involved in that. That is a grift. And the idea, with that type of hindsight, with that knowledge that you have of her trajectory in her career, you would have to think that AOC is completely disingenuous and that there's some huge market for her in the future riding the wave of now, maybe there is. Maybe she will quit her job. Maybe in 6 months, she will announce, I can do more for the left by not being a congresswoman, and go out on a speaking tour and do a reality show and then slowly fade from the public eye. And if that happens, then maybe Max Boot could re-up his story.
I do think we are going to keep seeing more of this, though, from both the center left and the center right, equating the quote-unquote far left with the far right.
Absolutely.
And saying we need to beat down populism at all costs to continue this dying neoliberal world order. I mean, we just saw...
I don't think they'll say the last part. That gives up the game a little bit too much.
Well, we'll see. We just saw Neera Tanden give tons of money to a think tank run by Charles Murray.
Right.
To specifically figure out ways to beat down populism.
By him, but they funded Charles Murray.
Right-wing and bitter, clinging, proud clingers.
There's that effective communicator.
Spay F. It's not only Scarborough. Yesterday, Whoopi Goldberg. Oh, yeah. There we go. Gregory from Oklahoma. Sam, you need to run for president as a libertarian in 2020. It would be funny to have you on the debate stage, and then later have people call into the show saying they were libertarians before they saw you debate the field of candidates. In 2022, you need to run for Senate against Schumer because he's trash, and I know you'd beat him. Well, all right. Well, you had me. Communist Dog. Hey, Jew Boy. Today's my 65th birthday. Happy Medicare for me. Enjoying the American socialism. Well, I'll give you one of these. In the sticks. I'm a Montana resident. There are places in northern Montana you have to be careful if hunting because you very easily shoot an animal in Canada and not know. My ex's family own a farm that abuts the border. It's literal barbed wire fence, not 10 feet talk, but a normal cow fence. Lead me. The Trump administration thinks Americans don't understand how airports work. Politics drawn poorly. Post 9/11, my coworker Scott Smith was regularly pulled aside at an airport security for additional screening. Apparently, his name was considered so generic that it had been added to the watch list as a possible alias for terrorists trying to sneak into the country. Louis, 77, it shocked me to find out that Sarah Huckabee is the same age as my wife. My wife looks young enough to have a racist aunt who looks like Sarah. Dankalicious, speaking about Long Island, recently a student at Huntington High School had claimed asylum, was deported because a police officer at the school thought he was part of MS-13 because he wore blue shoes. Oh, that's lovely. Wolverine, 9/11 hijackers crossed in Canada, FYI. I don't think that's true. Oh, legally crossed. There was a Millennium Bomber that was in 2000 was caught at the Canadian border. Buried Weiss, happy 100th anniversary of the Great Boston Molasses Disaster. May we all die surrounded by such sweetness. Psychedelic Quaker, would you agree that in the context of the Democratic primary and the debates that more progressive voices, the better? Yes, blacks, at least early on. Black Marxist, do you think Trump will be dangerous in 2020 if triangulated into a Tucker Carlson policy on policy with Dems having the House? Conceivable.
Yes.
I just don't think that he'll be able to do that.
No, if he's able to pair some sort of like right-wing social democracy with all of the other stuff he's got going on, he will be unstoppable, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Colleen, does this thing work? Is Sam ever online? Even sending messages to the live show isn't worth getting a Twitter account. P.S. I would have discovered MR if Sam didn't go on MSNBC, so there's a point to having him do so. Thank you, Colleen. We got two more. Meta Flight. The collapse of the British Empire took 2 world wars in long decline. U.S. looks more like an ancient regime, France or Tsarist Russia. Notable that both France and Russia were both conservative bulwarks. And the final IM of the day.
Also, the French Revolution started off as lawfare. It's all lawyers.
Jermo! Sammy, what would be more fun? 6 years running New York State or 2 years with Michael, 12-3? You are the winning Democratic candidate for governor. Go for it. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost me